Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We're going to be checking out a video titled Why the UK Went Metric and Left America Behind. So this video seems, based on the title, seems to be a very good video. I really hope it is by the end of this video reaction. I really hope it is. But it's a very good question, right? A lot of Americans probably don't know, right, that the UK is where America got a lot of its, things from. Right, obviously because of independence and so on and so forth. Most countries, had what the UK has had. Yeah, because the UK even changed themselves. But yeah, without further ado, let's get right into this video, guys. Thank you for watching. Please do like and subscribe. If you have any recommendations, click that link in the pinned comment section and you'll be able to recommend videos and I'll check them out as soon as possible.
This is a story about pirates, international tension, and petrol pump designs, and how they all relate to the UK's use of the metric system and the US's insistence on continuing to measure in imperial units. If you've ever wondered why Americans are out there using inches and feet and quarts and gallons while most of the world has moved on to centimeters and meters and kilos and liters, there's more to this story than you might realize. So let's get our basics straight first. The story begins with the British imperial system. It's a system of weights and measurements used in Britain around the time of colonization in the US. It, in and of itself, was sort of a tangled weave of weights and measures, and it wasn't officially defined until the British Weights and Measures Act in 1824. But these units were still what was used in the British Empire in various ways in the 1700s. So the British bring these units to the colonies in America, and the colonists do what they do. They measure things in imperial units, they take over Native American land, all is sort of well. Except at the time, France is developing the metric system, and by the early 1800s, the
France? What? Hey, well, up until just a few seconds ago, I did not know the metric was French. Wow, okay.
French are like, okay, we're going for it. We are about to revolutionize measurement and start using the metric system and decimals and things divisible by 10. The UK, for the record, is not immediately on board. You'll notice that the date of the Weights and Measurement Act is 1824. So at that point, the Brits are like, thanks, but no thanks, France. We're standardizing our own measurements rather than getting on board with you. Now, the US, funnily enough, had a tiny bit of interest in the metric system at this point by way of a man named Thomas Jefferson, the Secretary of State at the time. He had heard about the French system and was intrigued, but two things happened. Firstly, pirates. Honestly, pirates. He asked his contacts in France to send him the object that was meant to be the standard for weighing things in metric, which was the 1 kilogram. So a scientist named Joseph Dombey was sent off to Jefferson carrying this weight. Except, and I am not making this up, on his way across the Atlantic with a 1 kilogram object in his pocket, a storm blew him off course into the Caribbean Sea, and guess who's in the Caribbean Sea? Obviously, pirates. They took him prisoner, he didn't survive sadly, and the stuff in the ship was auctioned off, so the 1 kilogram never made it to Jefferson for him to consider or to help him try and convince his fellow countrymen about this new way of measuring. And then there was one other problem, that hostilities between the US and France had grown rather intense around this time period, which means that the US was snubbed in 1798 when France invited dignitaries from around the world to Paris to learn about the metric system. So then, by 1832, the US is definitely no longer interested in metric and decides to follow in the UK's footsteps and continue with imperial. Though they have to dare to be a little bit different somehow, so they designed what is known as the US Customary Unit, which is essentially the British imperial system, just with a different name. So if neither the UK nor the US were interested in the metric system at first, why did the UK adopt it while the US still resisted? In the UK, there have been numerous recommendations throughout the 1800s and early 1900s to adopt metric. Much of Europe was adopting to metric around this time period, which is of course the closest geographical partner to the British, and when it came to trade and science, it was becoming more obvious that switching to a standardized system that everyone else was using was going to help
much better.
streamline things and keep Britain involved. There was the 1897 Weights and Measure Act, but all it did was legalize metric for use in trade, not make it mandatory. Metrication or metrification, you can use either, as I've discovered when researching this video, doesn't really start in the UK until the 1960s. In 1965, at this point, the British government is well aware that they do not want to put the country at a commercial disadvantage, and the war period in the 1900s is now over, so they can go back to worrying less about whether the country is going to still be standing and worry more about whether they should use miles or kilometers. The initial idea was to make it a 10-year program. Some of it was pushed quite heavily and was easy to see change, like how in rugby, the meter lines replaced the yard lines. And some of it was softer or more voluntary at first. There's one area, speed limit signs, which never even happened. It was scheduled to take place in 1973, but as you might know if you've seen a British speed limit sign recently, they're still in miles. Other industries changed in the coming years.
Wait, what? Wait, dude. Like, if I ever land in the United Kingdom and I'm supposed to drive, I don't think I wanna. I don't think I would. I genuinely don't think I would. Now that I'm hearing that the signs are in miles, dude, I'm literally adopting to freaking kilometers. I'm now not making mistakes with kilometers. I'm now not making mistakes with and Celsius, whatever. I'm not making mistakes anymore. I cannot do this anymore. Oh my gosh, we need standards, man. We need like, oh my gosh, man. Like this is a journey.
With pharmaceuticals and paper in 1971, the paint and steel industry in 1972, textile and clothing manufacturers in 1974, and, wait for it, the cheese wholesaling industry in 1978. The carpet retailers tried to get cheeky in 1977 when they went back on a deal to switch to metric units because it made the carpet look cheaper if they displayed it in per square yard rather than per square meter, but legislation brought them in line. The Met Office stopped using Fahrenheit for weather in 1970, and there are fascinating stories in each industry about this process. So for instance, petrol eventually changed from gallon to liter because the petrol pump designs at this point had only been designed to physically be able to price fuel at less than 2 pounds per unit. Once the price of petrol rose, the industry requested that they be allowed to sell fuel by the liter because if they did this instead of the gallon, they could reduce the unit price and extend the lifespan of the existing petrol pumps. However, while much has changed, the imperial system is still a part of many people's lives in the UK, particularly if you learned measurements before the switch to metric. You'll find metric like grams in British recipes, but you'll also find that you still order a pint, and people talk about driving typically here in miles. Many still measure their height in feet, like 5 foot, 6 foot 2, etc.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a mix.
I don't think the measurement in height is ever going to be dominant in centimeters. I don't think it's ever going to be dominant in that. I think feet, inches will always be dominant in measuring like a human in terms of their height. But yeah, centimeter, I don't know it very well, but I don't know. Like saying I'm 200 centimeters, it just feels weird. But saying like I'm 6'1", 6'2", it sounds a little bit, more natural. I don't know. Maybe I'm tripping. What would you say if you had the chance to, say your height?
But from an industry perspective, the UK uses the metric system and is certainly considered a country that has gone metric. The USA, on the other hand, still uses an imperial-based system, and we are still taught in feet, inches, yards, pints, gallons, etc. Industries in the US that do need to conform for wider purposes, like the scientific community, do use metric. And we are taught about centimeters and Celsius at school, and our thermometers and rulers will often have both. But on the whole, your average American will run their day-to-day life in imperial units.
Yes.
Interestingly, much of the lack of enthusiasm for the metric system in the US doesn't come from the government, but instead from the public. The USA actually signed to the Meter Convention in 1875, committing to the development of the internationally recognized metric system, and in 1968, Congress authorized the US metric study, where they concluded that the US would be better off switching to metric. They began a voluntary metric conversion period, but the public response was the problem, because the public response was apathy, resistance, and overall confusion. It was relatively ineffective, so they gave up on it, basically. Other reasons given for the US...
I don't think it's something you should give up on, because like I said, for myself, I'm not used to it, but I've been here and I've done what I needed to do, because that's just part of life. I can't come to Europe and be like, oh yeah, do this instead. You know what I mean? But when you're in a situation where you think your opinion is more valid, then you're not going to change. So, yeah.
Switching includes the massive cost and effort it would take to make these changes, though other countries have managed, clearly. But more importantly, the real reason probably has to do more with general cultural attitudes and relative physical isolation of the USA compared to the rest of the world, making it easier for them to maintain a bubble of non-metric measurements. As someone on the internet put it, and I'm not saying I agree, but this is part of the American take, it seems like a lot of money just to change things that we're happy with to make non-Americans happy. Unfortunately, this isn't always the full picture and doesn't reflect the reality of working with other partners and countries. It doesn't really matter if Americans are using cups in their kitchen to measure their baking recipes, but there have been instances where a metric mix-up caused major problems. One example is in 1999, when NASA engineers sent up the Mars Climate Orbiter expecting it to be a wild success, when in reality it ended up either being destroyed or lost in orbit, not really sure, because the trajectory was calculated by two organizations working together using different measurements. So we have NASA engineers on one hand who are expecting that the results they're getting from Lockheed Martin in the US are in metric, but Lockheed Martin software was actually designed in US customary units. And in something as specific as spaceflight, that is not going to work. There ended up being no bad blood between the two because NASA indicated it was also their responsibility to make the appropriate checks to find the discrepancy, which they didn't, but the Mars Climate Orbiter had its life cut extremely short because of this confusion, and we possibly missed out on finding alien life forms on Mars that only appeared in the exact moment it passed by. We will never know. As far as the future, in a recent poll, only 32% of Americans cared about going metric, and there are no major rumblings or pushes or nudges for the USA to go metric outside of what it already has done. I would also argue we have bigger problems. But even after living in the UK for 10 years, my phone weather app is still set to Fahrenheit, and I can measure things more accurately in feet and inches than I can in centimeters and meters. But my own metric...
Not me. It's crazy. We're the total opposite. I'm with the weather right now. I can go to my weather right now, and it's in this, I was going to say nonsense, but y'all probably get mad, but it's in Celsius. Right. However, the measurement, centimeters, meters, I'm not good with it. I'm getting better at it because I'm more exposed to it. But inches and feet, yeah, those are my baby. Like, I know those like... You ask me, what is that? I say, yep. Yeah, I know that very well. But it's kind of weird how we're the total opposite.
Has definitely improved because I now use grams and a weighing scale in the kitchen. I also roughly know the length of a kilometer after running.
That I do not know. Because I'm not measuring anything.
5K park runs on some Saturdays, though what you don't realize is that the last kilometer is somehow longer than the first kilometer, and that's something we'll have to figure out in another episode. So tell me in the comments, do you remember the UK going metric? Are you team metric, team imperial?
I'm team just do whatever. I don't know. I don't have a problem with metric at all. I really don't. It's obviously been proven time and time again to be better than imperial. However, I understand, you know, it's like if it's not broken, you ain't got to fix it type situation. And that's really what the US is like right now. If I was currently living in the United States, I would not be using Celsius. I would not, you know, be trying to adapt to all these other measurements, you know. So yeah, I totally understand. But either ways, guys, thank you for watching this video. I'm out of here. Peace.